nervous. Hello friends, and welcome to another video. My name is Casey. If you're new here, this will be a really interesting video for you to watch as my first video, because this is definitely going to be the most personal video I've ever made on this channel. But this is something I've wanted to do and talk about for a really long time, and I've just been too scared and not ready. But I think I'm ready now, and I'm ready to start sharing more of who I am with you guys. I just want to mention before I get started, I'm going to be talking about my story, kind of like what I've gone through to get where I'm at today, and how I've overcome some of those things and I'm still working on them. So I do want to put a trigger warning, because there are some really heavy and hard topics that will be mentioned in today's video, and I do not want to upset anyone. So if any of these things would be upsetting to you, this might not be the best video for you to watch. But this video will include talks about abuse, physical, emotional, verbal, sexual abuse, as well as suicidal ideations, depression, anxiety, addiction. I think that's about it. Oh, and death of family members. So if any of those things are triggering to you, I would not recommend this video. Before I get started, I really just want to say that I am not making this video for anyone to ever feel sorry for me or to look at me differently, and that's one of my biggest fears. And I am sorry if I seem really fidgety or out of breath in this video, but it's something that I'm really nervous to do, but I'm also really excited to do. I have been through a lot in my life, and I have had a lot of bad things happen in my life, as have pretty much everyone in the world. But a lot of these experiences, I found comfort in thinking that maybe I could help other people. And I found comfort in the fact that maybe I would be able to one day share my story with people and help them see that just because they've been handed a certain deck of cards in their life doesn't mean their life has to go a certain way. This has not been easy, and I have by no means arrived and completely figured out everything, but I am doing so much better than I have in previous years, and I want to share that with you guys. So we'll just go ahead and get started at the very beginning. I was born in 1997, and my mom and dad were not together. They were never really together. I was kind of an accident or a surprise, I guess you could say. And I was born at a time when my mom wasn't doing super well, and I am not here to share her story because that's not my story to tell. But I will just say, like, she has struggled with addiction, and she had a lot of things that she needed to work through as well, and I can't really fault her for that because everyone has their things that they have to deal with. And so I'm not here to tell her story, but she was definitely really struggling at the time that I was born and in my early years. I was born and I lived with my mom. My dad wasn't really in the picture a lot. He was kind of in and out, and then when I was 6 years old, he actually passed away. So my dad hasn't been in my life very much, and I don't have a lot of memories of him. But at 6 years old, I did lose my dad. Something I just kind of like pushed to the side, which is a pattern you'll notice in my life, is I just kind of swept it under the rug, and I would really just pretend like it didn't affect me and it wasn't a big deal. People would, you know, ask about my dad, and I'd be like, oh yeah, he died in a car accident. Oh, but I'm fine, like, it's not a big deal. And that was kind of what I would say. So I lived with my mom, and like I said, my mom was struggling with her own things. You know, I think she really wanted to be there for me, but she was struggling on her own. And just a lot of situations happened when I was little because I just didn't have the attention that was necessary for me. I ended up going through a lot of traumatic experiences at very young ages, and just dealing with, you know, abuse, sexual abuse from people, and yeah, basically just feeling like kind of like neglected and not taken care of. But I also, at that young age, wanted to brush everything under the rug, and I really just didn't accept the fact that my life was bad or that bad things had happened to me, and I didn't want to deal with them. So until I was 6 years old, I lived with my mom, and we moved around a lot and kind of just lived a very like shifty lifestyle, I would say. A lot of people in and out of our lives, a lot of different kinds of people, which, like I said, exposed me to a lot of different things that have been traumatic experiences. And I'm not going to go into detail on a lot of those experiences in this video, but that may be something that I would be willing to talk about in a future video if someone is interested in hearing or would like to know more about how I've worked through those things. So when I was 6 years old, my grandparents came to, see how we were doing, and they ended up taking care of me and then my younger sister at the time, who was just born. And so we moved in with them, and I ended up living with them until I ended up living with them the rest of my childhood, with my mom still being in my life some, and that was, just like a complicated situation. And another thing that I just kind of swept under the rug. So when people would ask me like, why do you live with your grandparents? I would just be like, oh, like I just live with my grandparents because, my mom has just like been having a hard time, but like we're all good, like everything's good, like my life is fine, like don't worry about it. But deep down I knew, and I felt very odd, and I felt very bad because my family wasn't normal, and because I didn't live with my mom and my dad and my full siblings. Like I had, a kind of broken family that was a little bit messed up, and we had gone through a lot of things. All of that being said, growing up with my grandparents, we went to a very, very conservative Christian church, and this church was very controlling and a place where I never felt like I could really be myself. And after having, traumatic experiences that make you feel like less of a person, like sexual abuse and neglect, then going into an environment where you have to like fit all of the boxes that they want you to, and wear the clothes they want you to, and do the things they want you to, or else you're very much an outsider, was very difficult for me. And we ended up going to the school that was part of that church as well. So I very much just became a chameleon and tried to fit the mold as much as I could. But that was difficult and really added to the experience of feeling like I wasn't good enough as I was. And I think when I was about in 4th or 5th grade is when I started to realize like maybe my life wasn't as peachy as I pretended, and I couldn't just brush these things under the rug, but I continued to do so until I was honestly in college. That experience at this very conservative Christian church kind of just furthered this feeling of me not being good enough, and me not feeling like I would fit in, or that I had a place in the world where people could just love me and take care of me and want me for who I was. So I started to really struggle with insecurities, feeling very, very self-conscious about my body, feeling like I would never be loved in a way that was good and right because I didn't deserve it, because of the things that had happened to me and the things I had gone through. And I hid a lot of this from the world, and I didn't want people to know that my family was messed up, and I didn't want people to know that I had been hurt, and I was embarrassed about it. I kind of tried to like not talk about it with people and pretend like it wasn't an issue. So basically I did that all through junior high and high school and into college. And I had gone through some more experiences in high school that just kind of further grained in my head that I was not worthy. I had a relationship with a boyfriend that was just so unhealthy and very toxic. And we were both really young, and I was super naive, and he was a very controlling person, and I just kind of would do whatever it took to keep him around because I didn't want to lose him, because I felt like if someone dared to love me and to accept me for who I was with all of these broken parts and things, then I needed to keep him, and I needed to make sure I didn't lose it. And so I really lost myself in that person. And then I went to college, and I went to a very conservative Christian college. I finally had the gall to break up with this boyfriend where the relationship was just really toxic. I finally broke up with him, and I met James, so we started dating, and I still was pretty much pretending like everything was completely fine and that I was, you know, totally good. I hadn't really gone to therapy for any of the things I'd been through. I refused to go to therapy. I refused to acknowledge that any of these things were an issue. And then we had this very bad event that honestly was the turning point of me realizing that I needed to work through my stuff. And that was when my grandpa passed away in 2017. James and I had gotten engaged 9 days earlier. And I remember when we got engaged, I wrote in a journal that my life was finally perfect. My life was finally together. I had ignored all of these bad experiences and come to a position where I was now going to get married to this really great guy. Everything was going to be perfect from now on, and nothing bad was ever going to happen again. And my grandpa died, and it was unexpected. He died of a heart attack in his sleep. And I completely had a breakdown over about a year of time. When he passed away, it was like one of the people who had taken care of me, and one of the only people that I felt truly safe and comfortable around was taken from me in such a traumatic way, to just like have him there one day and gone the next day. And so everything that I had built up in this like perfect little world that didn't have any issues came tumbling down, because that was such a hurt that cut so deep to my soul that I couldn't hide anything anymore. And it was like once I allowed myself to feel that pain, the deepest pain, I think one of the deepest pains I've ever felt, it was like everything else just exploded out of me. I just was so depressed. I remember after James and I got married a year later, we decided, because I was going to start school at the end of August and we got married at the end of June, so I wasn't going to get a job or anything until I started school to see if I wanted to have a job, if I could do both. And so for July and August, I was like basically just sitting in our new apartment, getting it set up, and being by myself and not having really anything to do. I found myself getting really depressed, because once you're finally slowing down and allowing yourself to feel these feelings that you've shoved so deep down for so long, I literally was in the depths of despair, and I was so depressed, and I would just lay in bed all day, and it was really, really bad. I still didn't want to go to therapy though. I still didn't want help. I still didn't recognize that I had a problem. I just thought that I was worthless, and I was lazy, and I was stupid, and I wasn't worth anything. And that was why I was laying in bed all day, because obviously if I had to lay in bed all day, I was just lazy. And it's so sad that I had such negative self-talk, and I still do to this day. I really struggle with that, because I was just depressed, and everything that I had been through was just coming to the surface, you know? All of those times I had been hurt and betrayed and had people hurt me and use me and be selfish, all came to the surface. I also just really lost control of my, like, I think I forgot to mention trigger warning with eating disorders, so sorry. I also lost control with my eating, and my binge eating got really, really bad, and my acne got really bad because of that. And so not only was I depressed because I was just so sad working through everything, I had the worst body image I'd ever had because of my acne and my weight. It just was so bad. I just hated myself. Like, I remember I was on this choir trip before we got married, and it was after my grandpa had died, and I was so uncomfortable in what I was wearing that, like, it was literally, we were like on the beach, and I was wearing a flannel jacket over my shirt because I was so embarrassed about how I looked. And like, it was at this time I remember we were at church one day and everyone wanted to get an Easter picture, and I said I didn't want to be in it, and everyone was like looking at me. I was like, I literally cannot be in this picture because I am so ashamed of how I look and so ashamed of my acne. I cannot be in this picture. And at this time I would go into the bathroom and I would cry my eyes out and just stare at my acne on the phone, and you know, I would pick at it and then it would get red and worse, and I wouldn't want to leave the bathroom because then people would see it. It was just a really bad time. And then I got into school, my senior year of college, and I started, you know, trying to pretend to be okay again, and that whole year just sucked. Like, I really feel bad for James because our whole first year of marriage, I was just really going through it. And I would be okay, I would be fine, and then I would just not be fine. And then I would be okay, and then I would just not be okay. And it was all because I wasn't addressing the problem, and I wasn't working through these experiences and talking through them and realizing that I needed to, like, I needed to reflect, and I needed to process, and I needed to work on correcting these spirals that had been in my head for literally 20 plus years, because I never wanted to admit that I had a problem, and I never wanted to admit that there were issues in my life and that bad things had happened to me. Because if I admitted that, then it made me a weak person, and it made me not worthy of love, and it made me just another failure or another person who came from a broken family and was gonna live their life that way as well. And then I would find something to put my energy into. So for instance, when we were buying this house, I was putting all my energy into buying this house, and that would distract me for a few months from, you know, having a really bad depressive episode, because I would have something exciting to work on, and I would tell myself, once we're in this house, I will be happy. Once we have the dog, I will be happy. Once I get this, I will finally be okay. And that was so wrong, like so wrong. And not to mention, throughout all of this, I was really struggling with my faith, because like I said, I had grown up in a very conservative Christian environment that to me did not feel very loving and nurturing, and honestly hurt me, I think, in a lot of ways more than it helped me, which is very hard for me to admit, because a lot of those people I really do care about and love, and I know they care about and love me, but I just think the environment that I was in was not good and was very toxic and didn't help. And so this whole time I'm going through these depressive episodes and trying to figure out my life. I'm also really struggling with my faith and really having a lot of bad feelings towards God, because the God I grew up with isn't, I think, who God really is. And I couldn't understand how the God I grew up with, when I would do everything that I was supposed to do, and I checked all the boxes, and I tried so hard to fit into this church and to do everything they wanted, I didn't understand how that God could still let me feel the way I felt, how that God could take my grandpa from me, how that God could put me through the experiences I went through as a kid, and me still not be enough, you know? I really struggled with that, so I felt like everything I had thrown myself into with religion was falling apart as well. And if you've ever gone through that, that's also a very earth-shattering experience, because when you've put your entire body and soul and mind into being in a religion, and then you start to realize that maybe a lot of parts of it were wrong and not at all the truth, it's really hard. Basically, all of that to say, eventually, almost 2 years ago, it was September of 2019, I finally decided to go to therapy. And that was a really hard decision, because to me, going to therapy was admitting that I was broken, and I had a very bad view of mental health. I had a view that if you were mentally ill or had any mental health issues, you were beyond repair, you were weak, you were not trusting God enough, and you basically needed to just pull up your big girl panties and keep going. And that's so not right. I experienced so many traumatic things as a young child while my brain was still developing, that my brain needed to work through those things and process them and rewire pathways, and I didn't want to recognize that. I finally went to therapy. My first therapist was kind of a dud, but she did help me kind of get into therapy. She was very nice and talkative, but she talked a lot about herself, so it was helpful to kind of like break the ice, but eventually I realized that she wasn't really a good fit for me because I needed someone that was really gonna like let me talk through the deep stuff. And that is when I found the therapist I'm with now, and I've been going to her for about 6 months, and I had been seeing my prior therapist for almost a year, and I am doing so much better. Therapy helps you talk to someone, process all of these things that have happened, and figure out a way to work through them so that they don't have to have a hold on you anymore. When you shove these bad experiences and these traumatic things under the rug, you're essentially saving it to deal with later. And once that rug gets a huge pile under it, and then eventually you're gonna break. Something will make you break. And I'm just thankful I'm still alive, because when I finally had that break, there were a lot of times that I just didn't want to be alive anymore. And I just felt like it would be easier for those around me if I just wasn't here, because I didn't know how to handle all my emotion. And I just wanted to be gone. And I wanted to not have to deal with it. And I wanted to not have to feel this pain anymore, because the pain was so deep. And that's very hard for me to admit. Suicide is, I've heard it like basically like an explosion. Like all the pain that you're feeling is like shrapnel, and it gets thrown into other people. And they have to now deal with your pain. And I didn't want to do that to people. I am doing better now. I realized that I obviously very much struggle with depression and anxiety, and working through my traumatic experiences have made me realize that that's completely normal with what I've been through. I do take medication now. I'm on a antidepressant, and I started that in October, and I just have to say the stigma against taking medication for your mental health is complete baloney. Because it has helped me so much. There have been times where something will come up, or you know, I'll have a trigger, and I literally am like, I should be more upset now. Like I should be more upset than I am, because I'm on my medication now. It really helps me to just process things better and to not go into this spiral so quickly. And that does not mean that my depression is cured, and I don't have days where I'm spiraling and I'm having, you know, a really bad day and I'm feeling really down, because that does still happen. But they're a lot fewer, and they're a lot more easy to manage. I just wanted to share with you guys kind of my story, where I came from, my mental health, where it's at now, because I want you to know you're not alone, and I want you to know that you can come from the crappiest of situations and you can still make it, and you can still choose to make your life better, and you can choose that you don't want your life to follow this pattern. And it's not easy, and it's not perfect, and I am not perfect, and I have not arrived, and I still struggle a lot. But to be able to talk about it, to be able to recognize where I've made mistakes, and to recognize the bad patterns in my life that I need to fix, that's amazing. And I just really want you guys to know that if you feel alone, like no one understands, like no one's been through your experiences, there's always someone out there who can probably relate to you. And find your group of people that give you hope. Find your group of people that bring you up and encourage you, and get rid of the toxic people. So if you guys have anything to add to this, please comment down below. If you want to hear anything else from me about any of these things, I really honestly want this channel to be a safe space for everyone. And I've talked about mental health a lot, and that's why I wanted to share where I came from. It makes you not feel alone, and it helps you know that there's hope. If that person can make it through it, maybe I can too. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys in my next video. I promise it will not be so deep and dark. But yeah, thank you guys so much for your support, and I can't wait to see you next time. And if you ever need anything, I'm just an Instagram DM away. Bye guys.